Picture a British street in 1965. Not a driveway in sight, just cars lined nose to tail along the curb, chrome catching the grey morning light. Every one of them was a familiar face back then, as ordinary as the milk float. Yet most have vanished so completely that today's children wouldn't know their names. These 25 family cars carried a nation to the seaside, to work, and to church, then quietly disappeared. Let's count down the forgotten motors that once filled every street. Beginning with number 25. Number 25. The Standard 10 was the small car that got a generation onto 4 wheels. Built in Coventry, it was the sort of motor a young family bought when the pram no longer fit on the bus. For around £500, often paid on the never at a few shillings a week, you got a modest little saloon with a column gear change and just enough room for 2 children in the back if they didn't fidget. Fathers polished the tiny bonnet on Sunday mornings, proud as anything of the first car they had ever owned. Oral histories from the Midlands recall the Standard as the badge of a family finally getting on, the machine that carried them to Weston-super-Mare with sandwiches wrapped in greaseproof. When Standard Triumph dropped the name in favour of the Herald, the 10 was orphaned almost overnight. Today it survives only in enthusiast barns, a forgotten first step into the motoring age. Number 24. The Standard Vanguard was the big, roomy saloon that promised solidity in an uncertain decade. With its rounded body and generous cabin, it was the car of the ambitious foreman, the small business owner, the man who wanted to look established at the golf club car park. Its bench seat could take 3 across the front, and the boot swallowed a fortnight's luggage for a caravan holiday in Devon. Owners spoke of it as a proper car, heavy on the road and unbothered by long trips up the newly opened motorways. Yet the Vanguard was already looking old-fashioned by the early 60s, its shape a relic of the previous decade. When Standard Triumph pushed towards sportier models, the Vanguard was quietly retired in 1963. Once a common sight outside solicitors' offices and provincial hotels, it faded fast, remembered now only by those who rode in the back as children, watching the countryside roll by through steamed-up windows. Number 23. The Austin A40 Farina brought Italian flair to the humble British street. Styled by Pininfarina, the same house that dressed Ferraris, it wore crisp lines that made the family next door look twice. For a modest sum, it offered a bright, upright little cabin, and the later Countryman version, with its split tailgate, was one of the first cars ordinary families used to lug prams, dogs, and grocery boxes with ease. Housewives loved its light steering for the trip to the shops. Fathers appreciated the economical engine when petrol crept up in price. The A40 was cheerful, practical, and everywhere for a spell in the early 60s. Yet it lacked the badge glamour of its rivals, and as newer designs poured out of Longbridge, it slipped from memory. Today, the A40 Farina is a rare survivor, its clean styling now admired by the very collectors who once dismissed it as merely sensible. Number 22. The Ford Consul Classic 315 was Dagenham's most curious experiment, and one of its most quickly forgotten. With hooded headlamps, a sweeping American-style body, and a reverse-slanted rear window, it looked like nothing else on the road. Ford aimed it at the aspiring family who wanted a touch of transatlantic showmanship on a British budget. In the showroom, it dazzled, all chrome and confidence. On the street, it turned heads. Yet it arrived just as tastes were shifting towards the plain and practical, and it was expensive to build for what it offered. Ford pulled the plug after barely 2 years, replacing it with the sober, sensible Cortina. Owners remembered the classic fondly for its swagger, the sense of driving something a little bit special down an ordinary terrace. But its brief life meant few remained, and fewer still recall the strange, striking Ford that dared to be flamboyant. Number 21. The Wolseley 1500 was the car for the family that wanted a whiff of luxury without the bank manager's frown. Beneath the skin, it shared its bones with humbler Morris and Austin models. But the badge-engineered Wolseley wore walnut veneer on the dashboard, leather-look trim, and that famous illuminated badge glowing on the grille at night. To pull up outside your terraced house in a Wolseley was to announce quietly that you had done rather well. Bank clerks, schoolmasters, and shopkeepers favored it. The lit badge became a small point of pride, spotted through the dusk as father returned from work. Yet as badge engineering fell out of fashion and buyers grew wise to the shared underpinnings, the Wolseley name lost its shine. The 1500 slipped away, and the glowing grille that once signaled respectability now flickers only in the memories of those who watched for it at the top of the road. Number 20. The Riley Elf took the revolutionary Mini and gave it a bowler hat. With a proper little boot grafted onto the back and an elegant traditional grille up front, the Elf was the Mini for people who found the plain version a touch common. Inside it offered a wooden dashboard and a more refined air, wrapping the people's car in gentility. It appealed to the older couple, the retired teacher, the household that wanted the clever new packaging without abandoning old-fashioned dignity. For a few years, the Elf was a familiar sight, nipping about town with its extra chrome catching the light. But the world fell in love with the honest, unadorned Mini, and the fancy versions came to seem faintly absurd. Production ended by the end of the decade, and the Riley Elf became a footnote, a curious, posh cousin that most people have entirely forgotten ever existed. Number 19. The Singer Gazelle carried Roots Group refinement into thousands of middle-class driveways. A smarter, better-dressed relation of the Hillman Minx, the Gazelle offered wood trim, extra bright work, and an air of quiet, good taste that suited the aspiring family perfectly. It was the car of the assistant bank manager and the successful greengrocer, priced just above the ordinary, but well below the truly grand. Families remember it as comfortable and dependable, the sort of motor that took them reliably to the coast every August without complaint. It had presence without arrogance, comfort without extravagance. Yet the Gazelle was a car of the respectable middle ground, and such cars rarely inspire devotion. When Roots was swallowed and its brands rationalized, the Singer name was among the first to go, quietly dropped at the end of the 60s. The Gazelle vanished with it, its gentle refinement now almost entirely lost to memory. Number 18. The Sunbeam Rapier brought a dash of glamour to families who wanted more than mere transport. Sleek, low, and often finished in two-tone paint, it was the sporting face of the Roots range, a car with rally pedigree that could still carry the children to school. Fathers who fancied themselves a little dashing chose the Rapier, and neighbors would watch it glide past with something close to envy. Its pillarless styling and tail fins spoke of weekends and freedom rather than the daily grind. For a time, it graced suburban streets across Britain, a whisper of excitement outside the semi-detached. Yet the Rapier was always a niche pleasure, and as sportier, cheaper coupes arrived, its appeal narrowed. The name faded through the 60s and disappeared soon after. Today, the Sunbeam Rapier survives in the hands of a devoted few, a stylish reminder that even ordinary families once dreamed of something a little bit racy on the drive. Number 17. The Humber Super Snipe was the car of the bank manager, the doctor, and the town councillor. Big, dignified, and lavishly appointed, it offered leather seats, a burr walnut dashboard, and enough rear legroom to stretch out in comfort on the long drive to a country hotel. To own a Super Snipe was to have arrived, and it carried its owner with a stately grace that lesser cars could not match. Children lucky enough to ride in one recall the smell of leather and the sense of gliding rather than driving. It appeared outside the smartest houses and the grandest hotels, a symbol of solid British success. Yet the great heavy saloons were falling from favor, deemed thirsty and old-fashioned as the decade turned. Roots stopped making them, and the Humber name slipped into history. The Super Snipe, once the height of provincial ambition, is now a rare and stately ghost of a more formal age. Number 16. The Vauxhall Cresta. PA was the closest Britain ever came to a slice of Detroit on the high street. With its tail fins, wraparound windscreens, and acres of chrome, often finished in pastel pink or turquoise, it looked as though it had driven straight out of an American film. Families who chose the Cresta wanted excitement, color, and the envious glances of the neighbors. It was flamboyant, cheerful, and utterly of its moment, gliding past the fish and chip shop like a visitor from another world. Owners loved the sheer theater of it, the sense that ordinary life could be a little bit glamorous. Yet the flashy styling dated quickly, and the thin metal rusted with alarming speed in the British damp. Most dissolved into brown lace within a decade. The Cresta PA, once the brightest, boldest car on the street, is now among the rarest, its pink chrome dream long since faded away. Number 15. The Morris Oxford Farina was the sensible backbone of countless family lives. Another Pininfarina-styled saloon, it offered space, durability, and honest value, without a hint of showing off. It was the car of the careful father who kept a logbook of every fill-up, the reliable workhorse that started on cold mornings and never let the family down. The Oxford took children to grammar school, carried the shopping, and towed the little caravan to the Norfolk coast summer after summer. Its Farina styling was smart without being flashy, respectable without being dull. For years it was simply everywhere, a fixed feature of the British street, as ordinary as the pillar box. Yet its very sensibleness became its undoing, for cars that inspire no passion are the first to be scrapped without ceremony. The Morris Oxford vanished quietly, worn out and used up, its steady dependability now barely remembered by the families it served so faithfully. Number 14. The Austin A60. Cambridge was so tough it became the car that would not die. Farina-styled like its Morris cousin, the Cambridge earned a reputation for near indestructible reliability, which is why so many ended their days as minicabs and driving school cars long after the family had moved on. It was roomy, comfortable, and utterly unpretentious, the choice of the practical man who wanted value above all. Learner drivers up and down the country ground its gears and stalled it at junctions, and still it soldiered on. Families recall it as the car that took them everywhere and asked for nothing but oil and patience. Its diesel version became a favorite of the taxi trade, rattling through city streets for years. Yet dependability is rarely celebrated, and the A60 was scrapped in its thousands once it finally wore out. The car that seemed immortal is now, ironically, one of the harder Farina saloons to find. Number 13. The Hillman Minx was Roots Group's bread and butter, a car found on more British streets than almost any other. Solid, sensible, and endlessly practical, the Minx was the default family saloon for those who wanted no surprises. It came in a bewildering range of trims and updates through the years, always aiming squarely at the middle of the market. Fathers chose it because it was safe, familiar, and easy to service at the local garage. Mothers appreciated the roomy interior for the school run and the weekly shop. It was the car of the ordinary family, and there were an extraordinary number of them. Yet the Minx was so utterly conventional that it left little impression, and when Roots fell into decline, its most ordinary product was among the first forgotten. The Hillman Minx, once a pillar of British motoring, has slipped so far from memory that even the name now raises only a faint flicker of recognition. Number 12. The Vauxhall Victor was cheerful, bright, and everywhere, at least until the rust took hold. With its American-influenced styling and jaunty chrome, the Victor was Vauxhall's answer to the family saloon, and it sold in vast numbers throughout the early and middle 60s. Families loved its roomy cabin and lively engine, and the estate version was a favorite of those hauling children, dogs, and camping gear to the New Forest. It was a car that felt modern and fun, a step up in style from the plainer competition. Yet the Victor became notorious for one thing above all. It rusted with terrifying speed, dissolving around the wheel arches and sills within a few short years. Owners fought a losing battle with filler and underseal. As a result, despite selling by the 100,000, almost none survive today. The Vauxhall Victor filled every street and then, quite literally, crumbled away into the memory of a rustier age. Number 11. The Ford Anglia 105e was the little Ford with the backwards window that a whole generation learned to drive in. Its distinctive reverse-slanted rear window kept the glass clear of rain and gave it a cheeky, unmistakable face. Light, lively, and affordable, the Anglia was the car of the young family finding its feet, nipping about town and pottering out to the seaside on a Sunday. Over 1 million rolled out of Dagenham, and they seemed to fill every curb in the land. Children pressed their noses to that odd, angled window, waving at the cars behind. It was cheerful, honest transport that never pretended to be more than it was. Yet the Anglia was eventually eclipsed by its larger, more sophisticated successors, and the sheer ordinariness of it meant few were cherished. Once a fixture of every British street, the plucky little Anglia with its backwards glass has become a nostalgic rarity. Number 10. The Triumph 1300 was the clever, comfortable saloon that deserved more love than it got. Compact yet luxurious, it offered wood, leather-look trim, and a refined ride in a neat, modern package, aimed at the family that wanted quality in a smaller car. It was well built and pleasant to drive, a genuinely thoughtful piece of design from Coventry. Owners appreciated the sense that they were getting a proper motor in miniature, comfortable enough for long journeys, yet easy to park outside the terraced house. For a while it graced the driveways of the discerning middle class. Yet the 1300 was caught in the great upheavals of the British motor industry, overtaken by cheaper, simpler models, and it never quite found the audience it merited. It quietly disappeared, remembered fondly by the few who owned one, and unknown to almost everyone else. The Triumph 1300 remains one of the decade's most underrated and thoroughly forgotten family cars. Number 9. The Rover P4 was known affectionately as Auntie, and it carried an air of dignified respectability wherever it went. Solidly built, beautifully finished in leather and walnut, and reassuringly upright, the P4 was the car of the country doctor, the retired colonel, and the well-established family firm. It did not hurry, and it did not need to. Its owners drove it slowly and carefully, treating it as a member of the household rather than a mere machine. Children remember the smell of the leather and the stately, unhurried progress along winding country lanes. To own a Rover was to belong to a certain comfortable, unshowy class of Britain. Yet as tastes modernized and the great heavy saloons fell from fashion, even Auntie could not endure. The P4 was retired, its formal charm suddenly seeming quaint. Once a symbol of solid British virtue, it survives now mostly in the care of enthusiasts who still cherish its gentle, old-fashioned grace. Number 8. The Reliant Regal solved a very British problem: how to get the family on the road when all you held was a motorcycle license. With 3 wheels and a lightweight fiberglass body, the Regal could legally be driven by anyone with a bike license, and it cost far less to tax and run than a proper car. For countless families on tight budgets, it was the difference between 4 wheels and none. It puttered along the high street, tilting alarmingly at corners, carrying mum, dad, and the children in cheerful defiance of the weather. Owners defended it fiercely against the mockery of saloon drivers, for it gave them freedom they could otherwise never have afforded. Yet the little three-wheeler was always an object of gentle ridicule, and as licenses and incomes changed, its purpose faded. The Reliant Regal, once a familiar and hard-working sight, is now remembered more for comedy than for the genuine independence it gave so many families. Number 7. The Hillman Imp was the plucky underdog that took on the mighty Mini and never quite won. Rear-engined, with a clever aluminium engine and a folding rear window for loading luggage, the Imp was an ingenious little car built at a brand-new factory in Linwood, Scotland. It was light, nimble, and genuinely innovative, offering families a roomy, economical alternative to the establishment favorites. Enthusiasts adored its handling and its quirky character. For a while it seemed the Imp might rival the Mini as the people's small car. Yet early reliability troubles and the difficulties of the Linwood plant dogged it from the start, and it never captured the public's heart in the same way. The Imp soldiered on through the decade, but always in the Mini's shadow. When roots declined, the brave little Scottish-built car was quietly discontinued. The Hillman Imp is now cherished by a loyal few, a clever, likable machine that history has largely overlooked. Number 6. The Triumph Herald was the car you could very nearly build yourself. So simple was its bolt-together construction. Styled by Michelotti with crisp, handsome lines, it sat on a separate chassis with panels that bolted on and off, making it wonderfully easy to repair on the driveway with a spanner and a Saturday afternoon. Its party trick was an astonishingly tight turning circle, letting it swing around in the narrowest of lanes to the amazement of onlookers. Families loved its cheerful looks and the sense that it was theirs to tinker with. The convertible version brought open-air motoring within reach of the ordinary household. For years, the Herald was a common and much-loved sight, practical and full of character. Yet as unitary construction became the norm, its old-fashioned chassis marked it out as a relic. The Herald was eventually retired, and though enthusiasts keep many alive, the neat little Triumph that once turned so tightly has largely turned out of the collective memory. Number 5. The Vauxhall Viva burst onto the scene as fresh, modern, and irresistibly affordable, and Britain bought it by the 100,000. Crisp and boxy, with clean, American-inspired styling, the Viva was aimed squarely at the young family taking its first step up from something older and shabbier. It was cheap to buy, cheap to run, and cheerful to own, exactly what a growing nation of new motorists wanted. Showrooms could barely keep up with demand, and the Viva quickly became one of the most common cars on the road. Children learned to spot them in every color lined along the curb. It felt like the future had arrived on an ordinary budget. Yet, like so many of its era, the Viva rusted enthusiastically and was used hard until it dropped. Despite once being everywhere, survivors are now surprisingly scarce. The Vauxhall Viva filled every street in its day and then simply wore itself out into forgotten history. Number 4. The Ford Zephyr and its plusher sibling, the Zodiac, were the aspirational big Fords that a hard-working family could actually dream of owning. Large, powerful, and dressed in generous chrome, they offered a taste of the high life without the impossible price of a true luxury car. The Zodiac in particular, with its extra lights and richer trim, was the pride of the man who had done well and wanted the neighbors to know it. Famous from the television screen and the police forecourt alike, these big Fords carried an air of drama and importance. Families remember Sunday drives in the roomy back seat, watching the long bonnet swallow the miles. They were the cars of ambition, of Britain reaching upward. Yet the great Ford saloons dated quickly and rusted freely, and few were preserved. The Zephyr and Zodiac, once the summit of ordinary aspiration, have become genuine rarities, remembered as the dream car parked at the end of the street. Number 3. The Morris Minor was so beloved that it became the first British car ever to sell 1 million, and for good reason. Designed by Alec Isigonis, the same genius behind the Mini, the Minor combined charming curves with brilliant practicality, superb handling, and near legendary durability. It came as a saloon, a convertible, and the much-loved traveller with its timber-framed rear, a car that carried families, tradesmen, and district nurses down every lane in the land. To celebrate the millionth example, Morris even built a special batch in an unforgettable shade of lilac. The Minor was cheap to run, easy to fix, and impossible not to love. A fixture of British life for decades. Children grew up in the back of one, and many learned to drive in it. Though it survived into the 70s, the everyday Minor eventually thinned out through sheer use. Yet its charm endures, and of all our forgotten cars, the friendly Morris Minor is perhaps the most fondly missed. Number 2. The Ford Cortina was the car that conquered Britain, the machine that seemed to be parked outside every second house in the land. Named after an Italian ski resort to lend it a touch of glamour, the Cortina was clever, roomy, cheap to buy, and cheaper to run, and Ford built it in staggering numbers. It was the company car, the family car, the everything car, offered in a dizzying range of trims so every buyer could feel they had chosen just right. Fathers washed it on the drive, families packed it for the caravan site, and salesmen clocked up fortunes of miles in it. For a time it was quite simply the most common car in the country, the very definition of ordinary British motoring. Yet ordinariness breeds neglect, and the early Cortinas rusted and were scrapped without a second thought. The car that once filled every street in Britain is now, astonishingly, a cherished and increasingly rare survivor. And finally, number 1. The Austin & Morris 1100 was, for much of the decade, the best-selling car in the whole of Britain, and yet today it has vanished so completely that most people have entirely forgotten it ever existed. Styled by Farina and blessed with Isigonis engineering, it rode on a clever fluid suspension that gave it a smoothness far beyond its humble price. Roomy, comfortable, and endlessly practical, it was the perfect family car, and the nation bought it in its millions under a dozen different badges. It sat outside terraced houses and suburban semis alike, the quiet, dependable heart of British family life. Children were brought home from hospital in it and driven to school in it for years. It was, without exaggeration, the car that truly filled every street. Yet its very ubiquity was its curse, for it rusted freely and was scrapped without ceremony once worn out. The mighty 1100, Britain's forgotten bestseller, is now one of the rarest sights of all. There they are, 25 family cars that once lined every British curb and then quietly slipped away. Most weren't lost to accident or scandal, but to something quieter: rust, fashion, and the simple fact that ordinary things are never saved. So here's my question for you. Which of these did your family own? Which one did you ride home from the hospital in, or learn to drive in, or watch your dad polish every Sunday? Tell me in the comments, because somewhere out there, someone's granddad still swears the 1100 was the finest car ever built. Maybe he was right.